Welcome to the very first series of Get Active, Stay Active, the Parkinson's UK podcast. We couldn't be more thrilled to guide you through this transformative 12-week journey. This isn't just a podcast, it's your personal companion to building a vibrant, active lifestyle. Together, we'll dive into expert advice, hear inspiring personal stories, and uncover actionable tips designed to motivate and empower you. Hello, I'm Denise Waterman and welcome to the Parkinson's UK Get Active, Stay Active podcast. This week's episode will focus on eating for energy and recovery. We'll be covering what to eat before and after exercise to optimise performance. We'll discuss how to manage your food and energy levels around your medication, the importance of staying hydrated, and key daily diet tips to support overall well-being. With us today we have Shelley Coe, Senior Lecturer in Nutrition Science and a registered nutritionist, and also Rochelle Flanagan. Rochelle is a registered dietitian who also lives with Parkinson's. Welcome.
Thanks very much. Lovely to be here.
Great to be here.
Starting with you, Rochelle, can you please tell us about your lived experience of activity and Parkinson's?
Well, I suppose before I was actually diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, I did a lot of sport. In particular, my sport was field hockey, and I actually played at an international level for many years. So it was a bit of a shock to be diagnosed with Parkinson's. And we know that exercise is really good for helping Parkinson's symptoms and also potentially to slow progression. So at first I was, I thought I wouldn't be able to play hockey again, but a few friends encouraged me to do so. And so I'm back playing field hockey in the last number of years. And actually I've played Masters International Hockey whilst living with Parkinson's. So that's my main sport. I also walk daily. I have a dog, so walk the dog daily. And I do a thing called dopamine dunking, which is sea swimming, which is very good for your dopamine. But generally, exercise is really good for our dopamine. So those are the things that I do, and keep me living well with Parkinson's.
So just explain what dopamine dunking is.
Yeah. So basically, I during the lockdown, coming out of lockdown, I did a fundraiser to send people with young onset Parkinson's to the World Parkinson's Congress in Barcelona a couple of years ago. And I picked a challenge that would be difficult to do, and I was kind of scared of the sea. So I basically decided to jump in the sea for every day of my birthday month of May. And by the end of it, I was a convert to the impact of cold water swimming on how you feel, both physically, but actually the biggest thing is impact on mood. It really, boosts you. So I called the challenge the dopamine dunk. And from that now we have a group of us who swim, and we call ourselves the dopamine dunkers, and we go out once a week into the sea.
Very brave. I can't imagine getting into cold sea.
Well, I would encourage you to try it. It's pretty transformative.
I'll leave you to test it, and maybe one day. Shelley, what role does nutrition play in overall wellness and energy levels?
Yeah, thank you, Denise. So I guess just like for anyone, a healthy lifestyle, including, healthy diet and exercise, is important for people with Parkinson's. And in fact, because of the chronic nature of the condition, it might actually be more beneficial than sort of, the kind of general population. So the field of exercise research in Parkinson's is quite evolved, and we now know that exercise is very much good for people with Parkinson's for multiple reasons in terms of mental well-being, but also physical health and many more. But the area of diet research is still evolving, so we're sort of learning new things every day about the beneficial effects of diet and how that impacts on people with Parkinson's.
So it can make a difference eating the right foods.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, studies have shown to date that certain dietary patterns, so for example, low inflammatory diets or diets high in omega-3 fatty acids and polyphenols, can be very beneficial for people with Parkinson's and can help with the sort of symptom severity in people with Parkinson's as well. One such diet that has gained a lot of sort of research interest is the Mediterranean diet, and that's shown again different improvements in terms of symptom management and disease progression in people with Parkinson's. There is a lack of good quality randomized control trials is what we call them. So there are more trials that are needed to really sort of continue looking at diet and its beneficial effects. And I actually did perform a very sort of small feasibility trial looking at the beneficial effects of dark cocoa in people with Parkinson's, which was quite a popular study, as you might imagine. And we were looking specifically at sort of the potential effects on things like fatigue and some other symptoms in Parkinson's.
Rochelle, can you enlighten us? Give us some examples of nutrient dense foods which can help maintain energy levels for people living with Parkinson's.
Well, to be honest, it's the same as anybody, who wants to exercise or generally, keep up their energy, whether they've, kids or working a hard job or looking after their parents or whatever is going on in their life. And the nutrient dense foods come down to sort of three main food groups. So that is your carbohydrates, your protein foods, and your fat containing foods. They all contain energy in terms of the form of calories. So we all need calories to basically function in the day. And what I would say about people with Parkinson's is there's quite a high level of malnutrition in Parkinson's, where people often are underweight and undernourished and they don't have enough energy to, help them kind of get through their day-to-day life apart from exercise. So obviously if you're exercising, you need extra energy to cover that output. So generally speaking, people need those kind of three food groups. The one that is the most, I suppose, utilized by the body for exercise is the carbohydrates. So that is the foods like your bread, your pasta, your rice, your potatoes, the foods that break down into glucose. And that glucose basically gets stored in your muscles as glycogen. So you can see that as it's like your fuel tank, and that's what the body draws from to help you exercise. And also, it's one of the main sources of energy for your brain. So glucose is one of the few sources that crosses the blood-brain barrier and gives you energy for your cognition and your sort of mental capacity as well. Because obviously exercise requires mental and physical, and particularly with Parkinson's, the non-motor symptoms in terms of executive functioning and cognition is very important to be able to exercise without, falling or tripping or things like that.
So there are situations maybe where people aren't eating enough, so they will naturally not have the energy in order to do anything.
Yeah. And this is a big problem in terms of, like, there's fantastic research about the exercise, but research would show the combination of exercise and nutrition together are the more impactful, whether you have Parkinson's or you don't for any condition. But in terms of Parkinson, I think that's a gap in the research is actually that combined approach. Because if you can imagine someone who is an older person with Parkinson's who's underweight and they're going through a rehab program, they're not going to get the most out of it if they're actually not getting enough energy in to help them actually take part in the rehab and really see the benefit of that exercise therapy.
So, Shelley, how should people adjust their nutrition on days when they're going to be more physically active?
So on days when people are more physically active, it's beneficial to increase fluid intake. And, that's for sort of anybody who's more physically active, especially if you sort of sweat a lot or you're performing higher intensity exercises. So increasing fluid and water intake. You should also avoid large meals sort of right before exercising because this can cause some stomach upset. So eating sort of smaller meals and not sort of directly before exercising can help. If you are worried about, bladder issues, you should still try to consume at least 8 glasses of water a day or other fluids, especially if you're exercising. But it might just be that you sort of time those, earlier in the day or across the day. So yeah, drinking enough fluids, especially when exercising, is key.
Rochelle, can you tell us what a balanced diet looks like? And do you have any easy tips for those of us who don't enjoy cooking? Because there are plenty of people out there that don't and aren't very good at it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going back to my point about the sort of three main food groups, the carbs, the protein, and the fats. So I like to think of them as the three amigos. So every meal that you have, you should try and get those three components in. So for example, if it's breakfast, you'd be getting in, your Weetabix, for example, going back to the whole grains to help keep the bowel functioning. You would put in terms of the protein coming from, say, the milk that you put on the protein or on the Weetabix, and you might put banana on top of it, which would be a fruit and veg, part of it in terms of the fruit. Or it could be that you have, scrambled eggs, which is the protein, the whole grain bread, and then you might have grilled tomatoes, So I think it's about just keeping it simple, and applying the same principle then, to your lunch, in terms of a sandwich, or it, could be a baked potato with, chopped chicken and, peppers on it. Or so it's not about making it really complicated and getting all these really complicated recipes, and what I would say is with Parkinson's, it can be the energy to actually cook is quite difficult. So you mentioned there are a lot of people who don't like cooking. Can you imagine someone with Parkinson's who suffers from, fatigue and motivation issues? That's an extra, barrier. So the other thing I would say is people need to understand their timing of their medications and when they might be going off. So that basically means when your medication is not working as well and it affects your executive functioning, so your ability to multitask, and to be motivated. So you want to basically try and prepare your meals when you're on, when you have as much dopamine in your brain as it can get from your medication, and when you're able to focus, and organize yourself. That's a really important thing for people with Parkinson's. For people with Parkinson's, often if they're exercising the tremor, it can get worse immediately after exercise. It can actually worsen the tremor. So again, probably having things prepared that makes it easier to, take something on board. Because if you're particularly doing high intense exercise over an hour long, you need more carbohydrate after that exercise. So you could actually go for a nutrition supplement drink that has more carbohydrate in it. So that's easier to drink when you have a tremors rather than, trying to prepare food afterwards.
Shelley, does your diet affect the absorption and effectiveness of your medication?
Yeah, so and just coming back from a point sort of that Rochelle made earlier, I think that with Parkinson's, people can lose their appetite and become underweight. In cases, people can also become overweight. And then, of course, you get people sort of in that typical weight. And something that we're finding in research is that actually what might be important, more important than weight itself, is actually the sort of body composition of somebody, regardless of the weight status. So this is the fat-free mass and the fat mass balance in a human, in a person. And this is something that we're, starting to kind of understand a little bit more, but where there's sort of a poor balance of, higher fat mass, lower fat-free mass, that's actually, possibly as important as weight. So in terms of how that relates to medication and diet, well, coming back again to plenty of water. I feel like I'm going to be saying this a lot during this podcast. But, with any medication you take, it's always important to drink plenty of water with the medication, regardless if you're exercising or not. So, levodopa generally works best on an empty stomach. Some Parkinson's medications can be affected by intake of a high protein consumption at the time of taking the medication. And this is because levodopa and protein are absorbed at the same place in the intestine. So they sort of compete for absorption. So again, all in sort of discussions with your healthcare professional, but it might be best to push protein intake to later in the day so that it doesn't have this sort of competing issue with the medication.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, Rochelle, how do you manage the timing of your meals around your Parkinson's medications? Is there a secret?
No, there's not a secret, but as Shelley mentioned there is an interaction between levodopa and the amino acids that are the constituent parts of the protein, both at the gut, but actually mainly at the brain level. So they basically compete on the same spot. And this, I've spoken to people with Parkinson's where literally their symptoms they just don't turn on. So they basically because they've eaten it, taken their medication with their meal. So we advise people to take it at least half an hour before your meal and up to an hour to 2 hours after your meal, because that's what I try and do. And I try to generally take it before the meal, because generally I'm going to be in the more fasted state. If you wait to take it after your meal, if you've gone, to the local pub and had a carvery meal, that's a lot of protein that's on that plate. So it's going to take, at least 2 hours to digest that. So if you take your tablet with that meal, it's going to stay stuck in your stomach for a long time. And actually it degrades in your stomach. So it doesn't get to the small intestine where it needs to be absorbed into your bloodstream and get to your brain. But not all proteins, in terms of research, has shown that not all proteins are actually alike. And so some people might find, if they're more a vegetarian diet, that actually it doesn't impact their symptoms as much as someone who has a big, 12-ounce steak. So yeah, it's about kind of tracking and noticing what affects you, and making sure that you don't stop eating for fear of your medication interaction.
But Rochelle, hydration is very important as well, if in a Parkinson's situation. And how can that impact on energy and recovery?
So obviously, back to my point about making sure that you drink enough fluid to get your levodopa to where it needs to go. The other things is people with Parkinson's often have swallow issues as well. So sometimes taking cold water can help to stimulate the swallow and get the tablet down. Also, tablets can get stuck at the back of the throat, so making sure you're hydrating from that point of view. Up to 60 to 70% of people with Parkinson's suffer from constipation, and in fact can have it for many years prior to being diagnosed with Parkinson's. But there's a number of problems there. The tablet gets stuck again in the gut and doesn't get absorbed as much, so that's an issue. And also with constipation, it can create an overgrowth of less healthy bacteria, and that bacteria actually eats your levodopa. So that stops you from getting as much. So water is very important alongside the whole grains to help move your bowels so that you're not constipated, so that you can get more of your levodopa, so that you can exercise better. So so that's another, point. And then the last thing would be in terms of cognition. So we know that when people are dehydrated, whether you have Parkinson's or not, it can affect your cognition and your mental sort of skills, your decision making. So and that's obviously even more important when you have Parkinson's, because they are affected by as non-motor symptoms. So making sure that you're hydrated is really important.
Shelley, give us some practical tips for staying hydrated, especially throughout the day when we might be exercising.
Yes, absolutely. So yes, I'm going to be a repeated record here. So yes, it is important for people with Parkinson's to stay hydrated, and especially if they do have, if they experience things like low blood pressure, for example. But what we need to remember is that the water that we need, so yes, it can come from beverages and fluids, but actually it's found in a lot of foods that we eat. So especially some fruits, well, a lot of fruits. So if you're thinking sort of watermelons, berries, they all contain water as well. So water doesn't just come from the drinks that we have in a day. It also comes from a variety of foods, especially those fruits. So it's really good to try to drink pure water where possible, or other sort of low sugar drinks. And it's important to avoid too much alcohol, too much caffeine, which is found, for example, in coffee, found in energy drinks, and also to lower consumption or reduce consumption of sugar sweetened drinks as well. So these can not only sort of add to overall energy intake if weight gaining weight is an issue for you or a worry for you, but also these drinks can actually have the opposite effect, where they can increase your risk of dehydration. So it's important to sort of balance those types of drinks.
Well, I've taken it all on board. I think some of these things we should all be doing naturally anyway. But Rochelle, what dietary strategies can minimise nausea? Because some people may suffer from nausea and the side effects that might come when you're taking these medications.
Yeah, so in terms of nausea, generally speaking, with levodopa, it usually only happens when you're starting the medication and only lasts for, 3 to 4 weeks maximum as the body adjusts to it. And if you experience nausea, generally speaking, a bit like when a woman is pregnant, it'll be to have sort of dry toast, dry crackers, dry oatcakes, those kind of things that don't have a huge amount of protein, but have the carbohydrate and help with that sort of nausea feeling. The other thing would be, ginger tea, the old wives' tale of, ginger biscuits and that. So one of the things about that, just around the timing of your meds to your meals, is that if you have dyskinesia, it's as a result of taking too much of the levodopa into your brain, so you kind of get this overspill. And so if you separate your levodopa from your meal, that's actually going to make you absorb more of your levodopa, which is going to worsen your dyskinesia. So this is why it's not the same for everybody. So if you then, absorb more of your levodopa, you have more dyskinesia, you burn a lot of energy, and you lose weight. And when you lose weight, you actually absorb more of your levodopa. So it becomes this vicious circle and people end up losing weight. So what I would say is around timing with meds, if this is something that affects you, is you need to speak with your Parkinson's nurse. Ideally, have a dietitian that you're referred to, but we know that 90% of people don't have access to a registered dietitian. So speak to your Parkinson's nurse or neurologist. And so what they might do is actually reduce down your levodopa dosage, and then you can keep it separate from your meals. So you're kind of getting the benefit, but at a lower dose to reduce your dyskinesia. Things like, orthostatic hypotension, a lot of people with Parkinson's suffer from is low blood pressure. So understanding that drinking fluid and getting salt into your diet is important for people who suffer from that, because it can be quite debilitating. I've gone through that experience myself. And now, have got over that from making sure I'm well hydrated, adding salt to my food, and also I was put on a tablet called fluticasone, which helps to increase your blood volume. So that so if you have low blood pressure, it's very hard to exercise. You're dragging yourself around because of the fatigue side of it.
Well, hopefully the conversation we've had here today in the podcast will make a difference to the people listening to us here. I'd like to thank both of you, Shelley and Rochelle, for joining us today. And for all of you listening, we're here to support you as you navigate your journey with Parkinson's. Remember, you are not alone. Let us help you find your way forward. For more information, resources or support, please visit the Parkinson's UK website at www.parkinsons.org.uk. Until the next time, take care, stay strong, and we'll see you in the next episode.